Hello, and welcome to the Depth of Film podcast. I'm Elizabeth. I'm a film major who likes to geek out.
And I'm Emily. I'm an English major who also likes to geek out and analyze movies and books.
I'm Laura. I'm Elizabeth's cooler sister.
She's a guest today.
I'm not a guest. I'm on this podcast.
Okay, we'll see. Anyway, today we're reviewing Knives Out.
Yes. So Elizabeth is the only one out of the three of us who had seen this movie before. I was new to it, and then Laura also had never seen it before. So we'll be giving more of like a raw, genuine reaction to seeing it for the first time, and Elizabeth will be giving more of an expert critique.
I'm just in it for Chris Evans.
Okay.
Alright, so should we start at the beginning? Okay, so this movie starts out with a kind of creepy shot of the house and a slow motion two dogs running at the camera.
I was just like, what are those? And I was like, oh yeah, they're dogs. And Elizabeth gave me a weird look. And I was like, well, I didn't know. I thought it was like a kangaroo or something. It looked like one thing and it turned into be two dogs.
She's the only one who thought that. But it's kind of interesting because if you look it up, it is basically meant to look exactly like the house in the movie Clue. I don't know if either of you knew that. But since this movie is kind of called a modern day Clue by some, that kind of makes sense. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but at the end, they repeated the slow motion effect when the family members were leaving the house. So I'm wondering, thoughts. I was thinking it kind of was, I don't know if they're trying to call the family members dogs, or what was going on, like if there was some sort of symbolism going on there.
Are you talking about like when they're like, she like realizes he's having an affair and you see what's his name getting hauled away and then Marta is just like standing there drinking coffee? That scene?
Yeah. As all the family members are leaving the house, they repeat the slow motion effect. And I don't think they did that any other time in the movie.
I don't know. I didn't really pick up on the symbolism with the dog. I mean, you could be onto something though, because the dogs were barking when Ransom has to come back to the house for the second time. And the dogs also deliver that little piece of the house that the detective doesn't find and that Marta tries to like throw away, and so that she can get them off her trail when she thinks she's guilty. So maybe the dogs are like these supposed bystanders who actually like do play some kind of
like the dogs know like everyone's like true like heart, like they don't bark for Marta because they know Marta and they trust Marta, but they know Ransom's up to no good.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because I didn't notice any other slow motion. Did you?
No.
I mean, except for with the fake knife scene where he tries to stab Marta. That was kind of slow motion-y.
Oh, that's true. So maybe I'm just looking too far into this. But
so, wait, the dogs are in the first scene in slow motion?
Yeah, the very first shot is a wide shot of the house with the dogs in slow motion running towards the camera.
Interesting. Well, it could also be like just kind of like an ominous opening of like
a mood shot
like
kind of thing.
Like you feel like you're the prey or something as the watcher, with like the dogs coming at you, like
you're the innocent bystander and you're getting attacked.
Yeah, kind of like how like foreshadowing to how aggressive the family is towards outsiders type thing.
Yeah.
Ooh. And then the tables get turned. and they're the ones being kicked out.
Right.
Like, they kind of show how, like, the family's like, oh, Marta, you're, like, family, but they, like, actually, like, don't know anything about her. Like, nobody actually knows where she's from. It changes every single time someone tells a story, and she's like, they're all just a bunch of liars. They're just, like, they don't actually care about her. And that's really shown when she inherits everything, and they all basically attack her trying to get into the car.
Yeah, because they bring up what country she's from like 4 or 5 times. I don't
It's
know.
like Ecuador, Brazil, Paraguay. And it's like, okay. And Emily just turned to me, she's like, that's not the same place.
Yeah, every family member kind of gets it wrong. Like they didn't think it was worth committing to memory the country that she came from. They just know she's like this foreigner kind of.
And then they just are kind of like, oh, tell us about how your family got naturalized and how you guys did it right. And she's just like, I don't want to talk about this. And they just keep like pressuring her into it. And it's just like, that's very insensitive.
Yeah. So, okay, wait. For people who haven't seen the movie, maybe should we do like a little breakdown of basic characters? Or
Probably. So there is Harlan Thrombey, who is kind of the patriarch of this family. He's a self-made man. He writes mystery novels. I think specifically murder mystery novels.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 3 kids. 2 of them are still living. His eldest is Linda, who I believe is also a self-made woman. She started her own company.
right.
I don't remember what she does, though.
I don't either. And she's married to Richard, who we eventually realize is having an affair.
Spoiler alert. It's okay. We're probably gonna do more of that, I guess.
Yeah, there will be spoilers
Yeah.
for Knives Out in this podcast.
Just a
Figured that out already.
This is just a refresher course, in case it's been a while.
Yeah.
And their son, Ransom, also plays a large role. He's kind of a slime ball,
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
which is weird because he's played by Chris Evans, and I just can't stop thinking about him as Captain America in my head.
I don't know. People who are Team Iron Man might disagree with you there, Elizabeth.
Chris Evans is kind of bringing back his, what's the name of the guy in Fantastic Four?
The
Human
Torch. Human Torch.
His Human Torch days. He was kind of a rebel in that one, too.
You're the only person that likes that movie, by the way.
I love that movie. Maybe I'll get. Hey, if you in the audience like Fantastic Four, make sure you comment, because I want to review Fantastic Four.
Everyone that just started listening to this podcast hates us now. I hope you know that. This is why I'm the cool sister.
Alright. Separate and aside from Fantastic Four.
So then we have Joni, who is Harlan's son's wife, and she has a daughter named Meg, and Harlan is paying for Meg's tuition, but Joni is like getting it sent to the college but also sent to her, so she's basically just stealing money from him.
She's double dipping.
Yeah.
Yes. Did we miss any of his children?
Walt.
There's Walt,
Walt.
yet, who is the youngest. He has been running the publishing company for Harlan's books. And
He wants to make films and TV shows, but Harlan is adamantly like, no, they're my books. I won't let them get adapted into films.
Right.
And Walt's like, but there's so much money we could make that you just aren't letting me do. And then Harlan eventually tries to fire him right before he dies.
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yeah. So the night before Harlan's death, there is this big family party. Was it his birthday?
It was like his 85th birthday or something.
Yeah, that
Yes.
sounds right.
And kind of in the retelling of the scenes from the party, we find out that there are these very, very pivotal conversations that Harlan has with 3 of his children. One is with Walt, firing him from the publishing company. One is with Richard, who's the son-in-law, telling him, if you don't tell my daughter
You're having an affair.
that you're having an affair, I'll tell her. And then the other one was with, what's her name again? Joni saying, the jig is up. I know that the money that's supposed to have been going to your daughter for college tuition, I know that you've been also taking some of it for yourself, and so I'm cutting you off basically from that. So right in that one incident of the party, we have like 3 established motives, potential motives.
And Ransom
Yes.
has
Yeah.
the conversation where
4.
Harlan tells him that he's cutting the entire family out of the will.
We don't know that right away.
Yeah. There's a lot of scene jumping from like going back and forth in time. So I think that's revealed a little bit later. But all we know at the beginning of the movie is that Ransom and his grandpa Harlan have some kind of a dispute, some kind of argument, and Ransom leaves the party early.
We also didn't talk about Marta.
Yes, and Marta is the protagonist, I guess, right? Like, we kind of get a little bit more insight into her perspective than anyone else's, like where she lives, and she's the nurse and caretaker for Harlan. And I would say, would you guys agree, like, right from the start, there's kind of this, like generalized character painted of her as, like, she is this very innocent, kind-hearted girl. Like, you kind of enter the movie, like, just kind of believing that, because that's how she's painted out to be, I guess.
I think she's kind of, like, in a weird way, like, I feel like Harlan was, like, not, like, as much of an innocent person. Like, he was always, like, joking. Like, what do you think Harlan's actually like? Because you see him, like, only ever, like, really mad or, like, being really, like, oddly goofy with Marta.
Right.
And it's like,
yeah, what
are you actually like as a person?
I mean, I think that's, like, kind of hard to tell, but one thing that I think was a, like, distinguishing feature about Harlan is that he's surrounded by people who probably only care about him because of his wealth, even though they're family members. So, like, I don't know, we don't get a lot of insight into his actual character, but, like, it seems like he was really craving having someone who was, like, a genuine confidant and someone that he could be friends with who wasn't wanting to be around him or wanting to, like,
take advantage of him,
get on his good side just for his money. Yeah. And that, I think he kind of found that in Marta.
I think the movie also made a point of distinguishing the class difference between Marta and the family, because the family is always very well dressed,
right,
put together in this huge house, and they almost immediately from the opening scene in the house, which kind of goes out of your way to show you how huge the house is, with Fran going up, her name was Fran, right?
Yeah,
the
Fran
housekeeper.
Was the housekeeper, yeah.
Going up, like, all the stairs, to Marta in this, like, tiny kitchen.
Right.
And, like, throughout the entire movie, I don't think she wears more than, like, you know, a sweater or, like, a sweatshirt type thing. Like, she's always in much more modest clothing than the rest of the family.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that we were talking about kind of with, like, the roles of the different family members was that they all have, a lot of the family members have this shared pettiness and argumentative nature that it's like, I guess at the beginning it could be a bit incriminating, because it could seem like, well, all of these people are very prone to anger, and if there was a murder, it could really have been any of them. But then later on, it seems like it's less incriminating because no one really stands out all that much besides Ransom, who is kind of the black sheep of the family, the recluse who shows up to kind of snicker at everyone else's pettiness and then quietly or angrily, I guess, leaves. So he does kind of stand out.
It's also like it could, you'd like think like, oh, it can't be Ransom. Ransom would be too obvious because he's like painted as the black sheep. Like, he does everything wrong. He doesn't care. And it's like, so it couldn't be him. but then of course it ends up being him, so I guess we were wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, as far as, like, wanting to keep the audience on their toes as far as who's involved, it's like the three siblings are a little bit too even as far as what their motives could be. Like, they all have a little bit too legitimate, and they're given equal screen time, it seems like. So it's kind of like you expect the murderer to get more screen time, but it's kind of the opposite because Ransom's barely in the movie until halfway through, and then he just kind of takes on this huge role.
And then it's weird because they, like, make sure everyone's included. Like, you, like, forget about, like, Meg and, like, Jacob, but, like, and Fran, but they all, like, Jacob less so, but they all, like, kind of end up playing a big part. Because, like, Fran ends up being the one that's actually murdered at the end of the day.
Yes.
Like, Fran, the murder mystery is about Fran.
Yeah, I remember the first time I watched this, I had forgotten that Fran was even a factor.
Yeah, and Fran is kind of just killed because she has information, right? What was the...
She knew that Ransom did something with the drinks, because she saw him messing with the drugs. She saw him messing with it, but she didn't know what he was doing. And then she saw him at the funeral sneak up there to steal the medicine bag. And she figured it out and got the toxology report and was just like, I know what you did.
Right.
Though I didn't understand this because the toxicology, I think. Whatever, the report would have said that, like, everything was normal.
Yes.
Because, okay, so he switched the drugs, but she thought she gave him too much morphine, but she, like, looked down and was like, Marta. Oh my gosh, it's marked as morphine, like, I gave him too much of this, but it wasn't morphine, it was the other drug because he switched them, but, like, she thought she was guilty, so she, like, said she was guilty, so if the toxology report said that there wasn't morphine, it would have proven that she was innocent, and that was an issue for Ransom.
Ransom needed Marta to think she was guilty because he knows she's a good person. She's probably going to come out and confess to this. And we need to destroy the toxicity report because it will show that there wasn't an extra dosage of morphine in his system.
It will show that she's innocent. He doesn't want anyone to be able to prove her innocence.
Right. Okay, so, but, like, my question is, like, Fran hasn't been in the loop about any of this. So how does Fran know that it's important that there's nothing on it? She saw Ransom with the drugs.
Yeah.
Then she got the report and saw that there was nothing wrong with it. So how did she know that it was important?
I think they have a line in there that's like, she didn't understand what it meant. She just knew it was important, so she kept it.
Yes, that's what it was. She didn't really understand anything about the numbers. She just saw him messing with something and that, like, with the medications, and knew this is probably helpful.
Don't you think she would have asked her cousin, though?
Don't you think she would have told the police that were literally there?
This was like the only plot hole I found in this movie.
Maybe should we go back? I don't want to do, like, too much exposition, like too much summarizing of the plot, but I don't like. Should we explain the one scene where Marta switches the medicines and what was happening?
So basically, she grabbed the bottle that she thought was right, and I guess, like, there's a slight difference in, like, how the drug, like, feels when you inject it. So she didn't even realize it came out of the wrong bottle, but it was it was the right bottle. It was just labeled as morphine. So she thought she gave him, like, way too much morphine, and he was gonna die in, like, 6 minutes. Although I swear she said 2 minutes, and then it ended up being, like, 8 minutes.
She said 10 minutes the first time, and then some time passed, and Harlan said 6 minutes.
Okay.
So she's his nurse. She's giving him his nightly medicine. She's done this a million times, and for some reason the medicine falls off the table. That's the thing, because they drop the game that they're playing, and they throw it on the ground just because he's kind of pretending to be a sore loser. And then she kind of fumbles and picks up the medication bottles and injects it, and then kind of freaks out and says like, oh my gosh, I must have switched them somehow, which would seem very out of character for how many times she's done it and how conscientious of a person she is.
Plus, another point to make is that she knew she had the antidote, but could not find it because Ransom just took it when he switched the bottles.
Right. So, yeah, it ended up being that she had not, like, she had, I guess, like, doubly switched the bottles.
Yeah.
Because even though they were incorrectly labeled by Ransom, who was trying to throw her off, she was such a good nurse that she was familiar with the proper viscosity of the fluid that she had given him the correct one without knowing it, and with thinking she had made a mistake.
One of the things that confused me though was like she didn't murder him.
Mm-hmm.
Like he killed himself. Like at the end of the day he committed suicide, so why was she gonna get the blame for everything? It's like, wait. Yeah, like she still, like, it would have been murder if he had died from the morphine, but he didn't die from the morphine.
I think, yeah, that's true. I guess, what's Chris Evans' character's name again?
Ransom.
I guess Ransom didn't have the knowledge that she had re-switched the medications until she had that conversation with him at the restaurant. So, in his mind, the plan has still gone through successfully. She's given him the inappropriate dose of morphine because he switched the labels on the bottles, and that like toxic substance was still in his body and would have killed him. And so I think, yeah, I don't know. I guess there's an area of gray because it's like, had that actually happened and then he committed suicide before that could take his life, would she have been the one who was responsible for his death or not? Because that's what drove him to commit suicide, was trying to protect her, because otherwise he would have died, hypothetically, from her mistake. So I guess that's what Ransom was kind of banking on, was like, under that, what was it, the slay clause?
Something like that, yeah.
If someone is left an inheritance, but they are the one who's responsible for the other person's death, then they cannot acquire the inheritance. So that was the key to Ransom's whole plot, was if I can frame her and make her appear responsible for my grandfather's death, then I can get my share of the inheritance.
I feel like you could justify that with the fact that Ransom isn't a law expert. Mm-hmm. So he might be, if he was like over-drugged anyway, then maybe he could still pin it on Marta type thing.
I mean, they were all literally just looking stuff up on their phone for how to get inheritance.
Yeah.
And he was like, you're just looking stuff up, and they're like, well, yes, we are.
Yes, we are. Yeah. But, okay, so I think we did a good rundown of, like, basic plot.
We didn't really talk about the detectives.
Oh. Like who they
are?
Yeah,
there's two officers. One of them was kind of funny because he was, like, obsessed with Harlem's books. Mm-hmm. And then there's another officer who's, like, the chief, and then there's also Blanc, who's the detective that apparently Ransom hired, but nobody knows that, including Blanc. So he doesn't really know why he's here, because it looks like a straightforward suicide case.
Right.
But he's doing it anyways, because he's like a detective.
Blanc received an anonymous letter in the mail.
With cash.
Notably. Commissioning him to look into foul play that was supposedly going on behind the death of Harlan. So, what did you guys think of Harlan's character? Because Blanc, because he had a very, like, kind of this, I don't want to say swagger, but, like, he had this very, like, cool, collected personality, and then, like, the southern drawl, and he was just kind of like that stereotypical, like, I'm going to be an observer in the background. That's kind of, I think he even says that at one point to comfort them, because all of the family members are a little bit fed up and they're like, we're grieving, who the heck are you? And he just says, I'm going to be this unassuming observer in the background of everything.
I thought he was interesting because from a cinematic perspective, you start out with him in the shadows, which makes him look like kind of ominous. And they also, I don't know if any of you noticed this, maybe it's just the film geek in me, but they had the camera positioned like in film there's something called eye line, where it's like where you put the camera, like if you line it up with someone's eyes, it gives them like the perspective of like just like a normal conversation type thing of like equals. But if they put it below him, pointing up, which makes him look very powerful.
Oh, wow.
And especially like the way he was lounging in that chair in the shadows from that point of view with the camera made it seem very like mysterious, and it's like, who is this guy? But I think as the movie went on, he kind of became more, I don't know, vulnerable is the word I'm looking for, but like more human.
Yeah.
And like he starts to kind of look out for Marta a little bit.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting.
It's kind of weird because he already knows she's involved with the case because of the blood on her shoe. So it's like, why are you like helping her so much?
Did he see the blood on the shoe?
He did.
He was like, I knew you were involved from the first moment. And points at her shoe and it has blood on it.
From the moment that you walked in. Yeah. I couldn't tell if Blanc was keeping Marta close because he knew that ultimately she was a good person and she could not have been entirely culpable, or because he knew there was some level of guilt, like, and he was keeping her close kind of in an ironic way of like, you're gonna help me, quote unquote, like, solve this even though I know that something that you did is kind of behind it.
Because like, it's like also like, or are you just keeping her here because she physically cannot lie?
That was part of it too, yeah, because she throws up every time she lies.
Which was weird.
That's kind of a tell. Yeah.
Okay. Did the throwing up when you lie thing feel like complete like plot convenience to you guys? A little bit.
A little, especially the end where she just straight up like projectiles it onto him. It's like, and it's like a delayed reaction. I was like, plus it just didn't seem very believable, like how she was like throwing up.
I mean, I guess I could understand like if lying brings like you so much stress that like to that point, like
it just wasn't very believable throwing up.
I've never heard of anyone having that kind of an affliction.
Right.
You would think any kind of stress would make her do that then,
like,
not just...
It would make more sense if it was just like her hands started shaking or something instead of just like physically throwing up every time you lie.
Yeah.
I don't know that I thought of it as plot convenience. Like, it was obviously very convenient to Blanc that he could use that kind of to his advantage. She was very good at skirting around and saying what was true and leaving out what wasn't. So it wasn't always it couldn't always be used to his advantage. But I also thought that it was kind of an interesting like characterization of Marta, because you have this like I don't know how I feel about Marta, honestly. Like, I feel like there was definitely a redemption in the end of her character, because even when she knew she was probably going to go to jail, and she did think that she was still at fault, she didn't know that the medicines had been doubly switched, she was going to fess up to everyone. So like at that moment I was like, okay, she is actually a good person. But there's like this dichotomy to her personality, because on the one hand you have this very pure, innocent young girl. She's Catholic. She has like the rosary in her car, and it's kind of like they want you to buy into this stereotype of like she's the picture of innocence, but she does withhold the truth for a good portion of the film and try to cover up her
guilt,
her mistake, her guilt. So I like, for a long time as we were watching it, I was like, I really don't know how I feel about this girl because, like, yes, her family, she comes from a family of immigrants who need her help to be able to stay in the country, not be deported. So she's doing this for their sake. That's the only reason she wants to keep her guilt a secret. But at the same time, she's justifying the end by somewhat unethical means of, like, withholding information and withholding...
And, like, destroying evidence.
Right, destroying evidence. So, like...
Which I believe in itself is a crime.
Yeah.
But...
Okay, so, when it wasn't a hospital, the institute with the blood samples, like, burned down from it, there I was like, did she burn down a building? And then it ended up not being her, and I was like, okay, because that would have been... That in and of itself was very extreme, to just burn down the entire building. Mm-hmm. Like, literally anything could have been in that building.
Mm-hmm.
Like...
Yeah.
It could have been helpful to people. I mean, I guess that shows how selfish
That's
they
so
all
true.
are.
What about the other people's medical records? Like, they're just all gone. But
it was also very effective burning down of a building. It was like there's nothing left.
Right.
I think as far as Marta's concerned, there's also the factor that, like, Harlan's, like, dying wish was that she would get out without being charged with this.
Yeah.
So I think that also plays a little bit of a factor in her actions. Maybe not completely justifying it, but it's definitely a factor, I think.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Because I don't think she would have gone through with all of that on her own. It was because Harlan put her up to it.
Right. He came up with the plan, and it was the last thing that he said to her. And he committed suicide to make sure, or at least to try to make sure, that her innocence would be preserved. So, yeah, that's true. That is definitely a factor. Like, that was the last thing he said to her. And also, I feel like maybe decision making during such a traumatic experience would have been kind of like
impaired.
Yeah, impaired a little bit. Like, she witnessed a suicide. Like, she saw it happen. She feels extreme guilt and responsibility for supposedly mixing up the medications. And now she's forced with, like, the urgency of time. Like, if I don't act quickly, my family could suffer, and all of this other stuff could happen. So, like, maybe she just followed through with the initial stage of the plan, and then figured, like, I'm this far into it. I know that was part of the conversation that she had with Ransom, is you've come this far, might as well, like, keep going. So, yeah.
The other thing is, like, it's kind of interesting, like, you see the entire family, and I think the only person besides Marta that you see grieve at all
is the grandmother.
Okay, the grandmother and Linda. At one point, Linda's crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
So, like, Harlan goes through and he has an argument with Richard, and he fires Walt, and he has an argument with Joni.
Mm-hmm.
So they all had reason to be, like, you know, for Harlan to be upset with them.
Right.
But what about Linda? Like, do you think Linda got shortchanged not being in the will?
She was kind of a jerk, though. Like maybe not to Harlan, but, like, to other people she was kind of a jerk.
Because she was, like, the only one that kind of, like, took Harlan's legacy and, like, made her own
twist.
Like, she was like a self-made woman. Like, yes, she started with a significant loan from Harlan to start her business.
Right.
But she's the only one who really, like, took that and made it her own thing, which is kind of what Harlan's argument against, like, the rest of the family not getting money was that they were all kind of piggybacking off of him rather than doing their own thing.
Part of that might be that he just didn't want the money to go to her husband, too. Was Jacob their son?
No, Jacob was Walt's son.
Okay. So they didn't have any children?
Ransom.
Oh. Okay.
Ransom is Linda's.
Sadly. Sadly for Linda.
I mean, there's also the scene at the beginning, I don't know if this is applicable or not, but, like, when she's like, no, you are not going to make me speak illy against my entire family.
Yeah.
You're not going to make me do this. And then you see all the other people be like, oh my gosh, Ransom's the black sheep of the family.
Yeah.
I hate him so much.
That was a really funny transition when, like, Linda was the only one who had the...
Like, any emotion at all besides anger during the entire interview.
Yeah, she had the, what's the word I'm trying to say? The restraint and the presence of mind to be like, I recognize that you're baiting me right now. And then it just showed the lack of restraint so much more of, like, her demeanor being, like, juxtaposed with her other, like, crazy family members who were just going off about Ransom. And
I thought the whole interrogation scenes were done very well with the editing.
Yeah, I, like, it switched from person to person. I would be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But it was good.
I mean, also, you can tell she has that, like, special relationship with her father because they have all those, like, secret messages. And, like, at the end, she does the thing with the flame to see the note. And it's, like, I saw a thing that was, like, if you look at the other notes she's reading from him, they're all burnt.
Yep, I noticed that, too.
And it's, like, and she's always talking about, like, oh, we used to always play games. Like,
yeah, in the opening interrogation, she talks about how she had a special you had to have a special way to communicate with Harlan.
Oh, was that the letters, the invisible ink letters?
Which kind of foreshadowed the whole invisible ink thing.
Yeah. It's interesting because they did do a good job of creating a lot of, like, familial hostility that you're like you don't know quite before we find out about everything that happened with Marta. It seems like there's kind of tensions between everyone, so, like, it feels like one of these people could have been pushed over the edge just a little too much, and then it could have been any of them. Yeah, and I feel like Linda's character was she did a very good job with her acting of, like, keeping that ambiguity going, at least initially, because, like, you know she has a chip on her shoulder about her brother, who has been handed the publishing business and didn't really have to do anything to earn it. And then there's this, like, kind of, like, unknown sentiment about her dad. When she talks about as long as you played by his rules of the game. Like, I couldn't tell when she said that if she was, like, bitter about that or if she was just, like, endearing towards her father and it was, like, a little game that they played. I thought that was helpful at first in terms of, like, kind of keeping the viewers guessing as to, like, can we trust Linda or is she angry about things? Like, it was really hard to tell.
I feel like, as opposed to the other characters, I feel like Linda kind of over-understood her father. So, like, everyone else was, like, just didn't understand.
Right.
But I felt like Linda felt like she had figured out the system, and it was very much so a system of, like, dealing with her. Because the whole thing with Harlan for her was that, like, Marta suggested that he needed to be more of a father to her, was the thing when they discussed Linda.
Yeah.
So, like, he wasn't... So, like, she had figured him out, but he wasn't doing much of being, like, the father figure to her.
And I think that's why she felt like she was one of the first people to get so angry about the will, because I think she felt really, really cheated. Because, like, she actually had, like, no reason to be, like, cut out of the will, really.
Yeah.
Okay. So another character whose arc made me kind of mad was Joni, because she goes from being the one who's, like, trying to, like, stop all the fights, and, like, she's kind of weird, but, like, she's not terrible, and then she just turns into a complete mean person, and I'm like, I don't like you anymore.
Wait, at what point did you feel like she...
When the will came out, and she, like, forced Meg to, like, call Marta and be like, try to get Marta to, like, get out of the will, and I was just like... Plus, she just, like, I think she's one of the people that's like, look, we, like, accepted you into our family, like, we'll take care of you, but, like, you need to get out of this will, like, and it's just like, you had a turn.
A couple of the characters had a very, you know, dark side. Like, Walt comes, and there's definitely some, like, intimation, would that be the word?
Intimidation?
Hinting at the fact that he would be willing to like physically threaten Marta and her family. Like they keep kind of panning to his cane and
that close-up shot of the bottom of his
fist. Like, yeah.
And the cane tapping.
Yeah, he was
very
also
aggressive.
known for being kind of a heavy drinker, so that some kind of like you could infer if he drinks enough and gets angry enough, it could kind of get ugly. So.
And you see that when they're talking about like immigrants and politics, and he's like forcing her to talk, and it's just like.
I think that was Richard, not Walt.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, was Richard the heavy drinker? Or
I'm not sure who the heavy drinker
confused.
was.
Walt and Richard kind of melted together in my mind because they kind of look alike, and they both had anger issues.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of interesting characters in this movie. One thing that really struck me, probably the first thing that I was talking about after we finished the movie, was Ransom and trying to figure out the symbolism behind his name, because it was just like, I know there's something to this, but I can't quite figure out what it is, but no one really names their child Ransom in a mystery movie, without there being some kind of substance to that. So the English major in me was like, I'll just look up the definition. What does ransom mean? So according to Google, a ransom is a sum of money or other payment demanded or paid for the release of a prisoner. And so I had a couple of ideas about what representation that name might have for his character, but I know Laura actually looked it up and found the real answer. My idea was potentially that Marta was kind of like this I don't know, hostage. Maybe there's a better term, but like Ransom framing her was kind of like a sort of ransom. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, as long as she didn't get off free and innocent, his freedom would be gained. So I don't know if that had anything to do with his name, but Laura, what did you find?
Okay, so basically I found an article on Screen Rant, and it's talking about how like all of the like children are named after like 70s music icons, and then talks about how like the grandchildren are not. And one of the things is Ransom is named after Elwyn Ransom, the protagonist of C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, which is apparently like a famous mystery. Okay. So he's just named after a famous mystery character. Huh. And apparently, like the director or something has a quote in here that's, "I've always just thought that it was a weird, cool name, and I was happy I was able to steal that."
Okay, so maybe not as much symbolism behind the name.
It's like they're like tricking you. Like, you think there's symbolism, but actually no, it's just a cool name.
Okay.
Okay, did you guys think it was weird that Fran and Ransom both didn't get questioned?
Yes. Why did they like stopped at like the children and then just like took Marta like outside, started interviewing her, and didn't question anybody else.
Or the great grandkids.
Yeah.
Or grandkids.
And then they wait to interview the great grandma like
right.
for so long. And I was like, why would you not question her?
Mm-hmm.
Or just
especially since Fran found the body. They didn't question her.
Yeah.
Well, I think yeah, that's true. But I think, yes, she found the body, but she didn't have any, real evidence to offer toward anything besides conjecture.
I mean, she was at the party.
Until she saw him mixing with the medicines. When was the mixing the medicines?
Well, before
during
died.
The funeral.
No, it was during the
She saw him.
He left the party, snuck back in, mixed the medicines, and left.
Yes. But then he had to make a second trip back
during the funeral
to try to cover his tracks, and that was during the funeral. So maybe that was a couple of days later that Fran becomes a pretty interesting character, and just by nature of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place, I guess, if you want to look at it that way.
It's just like, still, like, she was the housekeeper. She should have known things were going on. Like, you'd think they would ask her.
Yeah.
And also, yeah.
I don't know why they didn't.
Unless they interviewed her before they interviewed the kids, and they just didn't show that on camera. But that still seems lame to me.
And it's also like, you'd think they would have made a bigger deal about Marta's medicine bag missing. They're like, oh, maybe they just took it for evidence. And it's like, no, her medicine bag is missing.
I can't believe she left it in the room. Like, wouldn't that be, if you were trying to cover your tracks and you thought you had given someone an overdose of medication, wouldn't you have taken the bag with you?
Unless it was something like she, on a normal day, would have left the bag there.
Okay.
So it would have been suspicious if she took it. But I don't know how that works.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe she just wanted to keep it, like, business as usual. I don't know.
I was also hoping the great-grandma would have a little bit more of a role, because I thought she was hilarious. And, like, she did have, like, an important role, it just wasn't quite where I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And the great-grandchildren are just kind of forgotten about, it feels like, sometimes.
Yeah. They were more, like, very secondary characters there for fluff, I think, for lack of a better... Like, I know, what was the granddaughter's name?
Meg.
Meg was, like, kind of one of the few characters who cared about Marta and wanted to console her in the moments when she was feeling, like, distressed or overwhelmed.
Doesn't she offer her champagne, or is that Fran?
Yes, and the stash of...
Whatever drug.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. So that's mainly her role, being that, like, comforter character, and then the other kid, Jacob,
doesn't really do much.
He's just there to share information because he was in the bathroom the whole time.
Yeah. So they're very minor characters, and they're also, like, I feel like this goes for a lot of, like, murder mystery type movies, but, like, a lot of the characters are very static. Like, they don't change over time, and they're basically known for one thing, like one identifying feature that makes them easy to pick out, because there's so many of them, and because there are so many, like, potentially mixed motives. So yeah, I feel like there were only a few characters who you really got to know beyond that, like, face value of, like, okay, this is what they're pretty much known for. But what did you guys think of in terms of, like, themes for this movie? Did anything stick out to you?
Probably just, like, not everyone is, like, what they look like on the outside, but, like, sometimes they are.
Sometimes they just are.
You're gonna have to explain that.
Like Joni and, like, some of the characters, like, they seem, and, like, what's her name, the daughter of Harlan? Linda. They both seem like, oh, nice people. And Richard, they're all like, oh, so nice people. And then Richard's, like, having an affair, and they all, like, just start, like, attacking Marta. Like, and it's just, like, they're not nice. But then, like, there's definitely some characters like, the other son, Walt, and them that are, like, or, like, Meg, if you want just the opposite. Meg seems nice at the beginning. She stays nice throughout all of it. Walt is, like, mean at the beginning, and he's just kind of gets worse. It's, like, they're just kind of, like, they're very real, but then, like, the rest of them are kind of fake.
The movie seems to be hitting on that, like, kindness is important, and genuine kindness, not just the, oh, we'll support you as long as we're rich.
Yeah, there's definitely a noticeable message about that through Detective Blanc, who kind of, at the end, he commends Marta, and he says, basically, like, you won in the end because of your goodness, and not because you played by his name is escaping me.
Harlan?
By Harlan's game of, like, doing what the typical mystery character would do, and looking out for yourself and no one else, and kind of covering your guilt. Because the thing that really pushed Marta over the edge and made her evaluate her priorities was when she knew that if she tried to keep covering up her guilt, the housekeeper, Fran would die. Because there was this one scene where she had kind of a crossroads of like, if I just leave her and keep concealing my guilt and I don't, call 911, she'll die here. So I think that was the moment where she thought to herself, like, she even said out loud, like, people are getting hurt, even if I go to jail, I don't really care. Like, at this point, it needs to stop.
And I think Blanc kind of also shows that when she's like, well, what should I do about the family? Like, should I help them? And he's like, well, I have an opinion on that. But you're going to do what your heart leads you to do, and I know you're not going to change, what your heart's saying.
Right.
I really liked the symbolism of, I don't know if you guys caught this, but at the beginning, you see Fran starting to make Harlan's coffee for the day, which is when she goes up and she finds the body. Mm-hmm. But he has a very specific mug that says, my house, my rules, my coffee, or something like that.
And at the end,
Marta is drinking out of that cup.
Mug. I knew there was something there, but I couldn't. Yeah,
I was confused by the shawl.
She had like a blanket around her or something.
Was that like Harlem's like blanket?
I don't know.
I was like, I understand the coffee. It's the shawl thing that I don't get.
Because it kind of symbolized how the beginnings are, for most of the movie, Marta's under the assumption that, this is Harlan's house, these are Harlan's wishes, I have to go by what Harlan wanted when he died. Right. Yeah. And then she makes that change when Fran is about to die, and she decides to do it her way.
Right.
And then she finds out the house is hers.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. That's a really good observation. I also thought there was some kind of symbolism behind, there was that chair that was surrounded by all of the knives, and when Detective Blanc sits in that chair, it's like, I kind of felt like the setting was paralleled with like where we were in the plot, because when he sits in the chair, it's like we're almost right at the climax, like he's almost at the cusp of figuring out who is responsible, and the knives are all pointing to him as if almost like a target or something like that.
You could say that they were donut shaped. And there was a hole in the middle.
There was a hole, and he was at the center.
Okay, so I noticed this. It was like bugging me that none of the children, when they were being interrogated, were sitting, like, they were always to the side. They were never like directly in the center of the knives, but they were always there. Like to the right, their right.
Yeah.
But they were never in the center. And the only two people who sit down in the center of the knives are Blanc and Marta in that end scene.
Wow.
So I figured for Marta, it was like symbolism that and like foreshadowing that Ransom was going to grab a knife and go for her. So it was kind of like the stabbing in the back type thing with the knives behind her. I didn't really understand Blanc, unless it was maybe like the donut thing, but that seems like a stretch.
It was probably like I think, doesn't Harlan also sit there?
Does he?
I don't know. I think it's just showing like superiority, like, ooh, he's sitting in the chair. Ooh, she's sitting in the chair, like it's her house, she's sitting in the chair.
Yeah. I wonder what there was to just the image of a knife, because, I mean, the movie is called Knives Out, and the way that Harlan commits suicide is with a knife, and there's an important scene when he's talking to Marta, when Harlan is talking to Marta right before he dies, and he's holding a knife, but he doesn't know that he'll have to use it for anything.
And the portrait
But-
has a knife.
Yeah, he says something about, doesn't he say something about it's important to know the difference between what's real and what's a prop or something
He
like
talks
that?
about, he's like, Ransom's not the sharpest, like, he's not that smart. Like, he can't even tell a real knife from a prop.
Yeah,
And then that's like when it comes full
Right.
circle and he
So
doesn't know it's a prop.
that was definitely foreshadowing. But I'm just wondering, like, a knife is kind of like a motif in this.
I think it
movie?
has to do with, one, the amount of backstabbing that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I think, like, I don't know, I feel like when people talk about knives and, like, I think I've heard, they had, like, a talk on campus about, like, female serial killers and, like, their motives and things like that. And I guess, like, statistically, when a female is the assassin, it's usually someone that's, like, close to them, and they have to, like, plan it type thing.
Okay.
And they talked about, like, I don't remember if it was women or men are more likely to use a knife.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone uses a knife, it usually means it's, like, someone you're very close to. It's a very, like, personal way of killing someone. Because,
Oh,
like, you want to
wow.
get up close and personal to them
Right.
to stab them. Like, you're not just poisoning a drink. You're,
gosh.
like...
Ugh.
So I think that's the significance.
Okay.
Also...
What about... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
In the scene where Marta is, like, getting ready to give him his medicine and stuff,
Yeah.
when they cut to Harlan, when she's, like, just preparing the shot, it cuts to Harlan, and in the foreground of the shot, really out of focus, is a knife that's sideways, like, on a little stand,
Okay.
like, in front of his face, between his face and the camera. And then when they switch, and she's, like, literally putting it into his arm, there's another knife that is, like, like, down, like it's being, like it was stabbed in the table or something. I'm assuming it's standing on a stand, but that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Also in the foreground, slightly less in focus, like more in focus, not quite all the way in focus, which I thought was interesting. It's like they're, like, foreshadowing, like, oh, the knife is coming more and more into focus as he's figuring out what's going on.
Huh. Interesting. I didn't notice that. I was wondering, like, isn't there something that's like a comparison of like the truth with a double-edged sword or something like that?
Yes, I think so.
I don't know, like, because I know there was a couple of, like, mentionings of the concept of truth. I think it was maybe when Blanc was interviewing the great-grandma and asking her, like, I think you have the truth. What are you going to do with it? There was also a lot of, like, there was the conversation between Blanc and Marta, and where he was saying basically, like, the truth always comes to light. Like, he didn't say it in those explicit terms, but it was also interesting because you were talking about the lighting earlier, and when they have that conversation, he starts out in the shadows, and then he kind of emerges into the light to talk to her about how that same thing happens in these investigations, that, like,
Oh, that's interesting.
it will come out in the end. Something, he was saying something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so doesn't have to do with themes, but we were talking about this before we started filming. The, like, how much would the family actually lose from not being in the will?
Right.
Because they all seem fairly well off, and most of them have, like, their own businesses. So it's like, are you really, like, you're not going to be poor if you don't have this money, right? Like,
Right.
you're still going to be fine. It just seems, it's like, how much of this is out of need and how much of this is out of greed?
Mm-hmm.
I think Joni might, honest to goodness, be broke. I got the feel that, like, she has a business, but, like, it's kind of a weird, like, not super successful business was my vibe
It's
I
like
was
a
getting.
social media thing.
Wasn't it
Yeah.
like a skincare business called, like, Flam or something?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, something weird like that.
Yeah. I don't know. Scam. Rhymes with scam.
Plus, so Walt would he lost his job and he didn't get the fortune.
Mm-hmm.
But, you just find another job. If you have all this experience running a publishing company, surely you can find a job with a publishing company.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder whether the heat of their anger, what was driving it for them? Was it that they had been accustomed to, kind of having this cushion, this financial cushion with their father for their whole lives, so it was really uncomfortable for them not to have that anymore, even if they didn't actually need it? Or was it more of a loyalty thing? There was a lot of ironic conversations about, loyalty in terms of, we have welcomed you into our family, and therefore you owe it to us to do what a good family member does and, chalk up the inheritance. But she was only a supposed member of their family so far as it would work to their gain, because I don't know that they treated her that well.
Also, I found it really weird. Linda and Walt both make a point of saying that they thought Marta should be at the funeral, but they got outvoted. And I'm assuming Meg would have been a yes. So, who was voting and who voted no?
And why was there a vote? It was a funeral.
Yeah.
That seemed odd to me.
That is weird. I don't know. I didn't catch that.
It kind of made me think, okay, they just, decided they didn't want her at the funeral, but it was, a cover-up that, I voted that you should be there, but...
You thought, it was unanimous that, all of them didn't want her there? Or...
I think it's a possibility.
I think it's a possibility.
Yeah.
There was something fishy going on with that. It was weird that two characters said that to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about the theme of goodness winning in the end, greed being, a person's downfall.
I think the other theme was that, you can't just, I'm going to completely mix my metaphors here.
It's okay.
Ride on the wings of someone else. You have to, make your own fortune.
Right. Yeah.
It was another big theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about any themes about family, or what it means to truly be family to someone? Because I feel in a lot of ways Marta was almost she was one of the closest ones to Harlan, and I know there was some resentment there with Ransom, because there was that conversation where he was talking about how one of the last things that Harlan said to him was that Marta beats me more than you do at whatever the game was that they would play. And he really took that to heart, because he thought, that's the one thing I have with my dad, is that I can always beat him at this game, which could also be a little bit metaphorical too, because if you think of the whole thing as a game, Marta beats Ransom at his own game.
Yeah. But they both beat Harlan.
They both beat Harlan?
Yeah, because Ransom was saying that he was one of the only ones that could beat him.
Yeah.
So they both kind of mess up Harlan's plan in the end, I think.
Yeah.
But Marta also messes up Ransom's plan.
Right. Yeah. We were also talking about the trick window, and how that was an interesting feature in the house. Did you guys think that, this is probably just conjecture, because I don't know if there's any way to know, but do you think that Harlan's character put that window in his house just because it's cool and he was a murder mystery writer, or because he anticipated that, something could happen to me one day and I could be the subject of a mystery, and I'm gonna put this I'm gonna put this in my house for that reason.
Well, one of the police guys was talking about like, oh, that's from such and such book. So I'm wondering if that was like it was already in the house and it was just inspiration for one of his novels type of thing. So I'm wondering if it was just cool architecture.
Yeah.
That guy was really funny, just like, those statues are from this novel and this was where they did this, and that was funny.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing we were talking about before the podcast, but like the level, like the quality of the comic relief in this movie, like it was like very jolting transitions between like one really extreme scene where you see a dead person and then boom, the next scene is like the comic relief of some minor character like doing something really funny. So like I guess that was good in a sense because it helped to keep it like it helped to break up the intensity. But I don't know, what did you guys have any thoughts on that?
I just thought it was very well done.
I just like seeing him sing with the music.
Yeah, that was good when he has the earbuds in. Meanwhile, like poor Marta is trying to figure out how to get emergency help for
and the ambulance is in the background.
Yeah.
That was funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about them finding the body at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the cinematography for this was like really awesome because they like go out of their way not to show you Fran's face until the moment that she opens the door and sees the dead body. Like there's a couple shots of like where they cut off her head and they like just show her like hand opening doors
or ducking into a doorway
or her legs going up the stairwell.
Yeah.
Or like her face is in shadow. It's all very clever.
Yeah.
But then simultaneously they're cutting back and forth between her going up the stairs to like all these like weird statues and faces of statues the whole way up.
I didn't know what that was about really. Like
there must be some sort of symbolism there, but I'm not sure what it is.
I don't know. Maybe just something with like wealth. And
it did show off Harlan's wealth.
Yeah. And kind of how it's like
might just be like
temporary.
Set building.
Yeah.
Like building the setting.
It could also kind of be like representative of how like a lot of the characters are kind of set in their ways.
Oh.
And like there's a lot of faces and
set like stone or like a statue, like a portrait.
Or at least like hearts of stone almost, like a lot of them.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I also really liked that opening scene of like it was a way to show you how big the house is and show you like there's a lot of like winding passageways and things, and like just you suspect like this is a really good house for creepy stuff to go down in because there's just so many weird like nooks and crannies. And then also like it builds that tension, but then also there's this like mysteriousness of like the camera kind of zooming in on certain objects for no reason, and you as the viewer you have to kind of pick out like, is this going to be important later, or are they just kind of like trying to throw me off right now and none of it is really that important. Like it was an interesting way to open it, like here's a little mini tour of the house and like, by the way, some of this might be important later. Yeah, I don't know.
And it was also interesting because I think as a general rule in like murder mysteries, like classically you usually don't find the dead body until like further in.
Yeah.
But that was like literally like first scene was finding the dead body.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I was thinking about how in this creative writing class that I took, there's a way of opening a story called, I think it's like in medias res or something like that, which means in the middle of action.
Okay.
So it was kind of one of those. It would have been even more so if it was like the first scene was right when she opens the door and finds him murdered. Like, there was a little bit of buildup of, like, oh, it's the regular everyday routine of I'm gonna get him his tray and his coffee, but, like, yeah, that's what it made me think of. It wasn't your typical, like, let's do a little introduction of the characters first before we get into the big, like, shocking reveal. It was just like, I'm gonna drop you in the middle of this traumatic event, and then we're going to backtrack and be like, how did we get here? So that's an interesting, like,
it also,
storytelling technique.
Added a lot of tension because you start out with that ominous shot with the slow motion dogs in the house coming out of the house.
Yeah.
And then you have this long build up of her heading up to the room, and you're like, okay, with all this build up, something exciting has to happen when she opens the door.
Yeah.
And then she finds the dead body. So I thought that was well done.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you guys have anything more to say about, like, general interpretations or analysis, but we could maybe just give, like, our opinions of what we thought overall of the movie. Like, would you recommend it to people? What did you think coming off of watching it?
I would definitely recommend it. The first time I watched this, my roommate had talked me into it. She was like, I like this movie. You'll like this movie. And I was like, okay. It's not usually, I don't usually go for, like, a ton of, like, mystery movies. So it was kind of like, oh, yeah, this was fun. And we had watched Clue first. And I was like, oh, I liked that. So then she was like, well, you probably like this too. And I finished watching it, and it was, like, immediately like, oh, I kind of want to watch that again. Like,
yeah.
I don't really like mysteries.
No.
So, like, it was good. Like, I don't regret watching it, but I also just don't like the sight of blood very much.
Yes.
So that was also a bit jarring for me. But if it was still, like, very, like, interesting plot, and I still, like, got into it. It just, I would recommend it to somebody who likes mysteries. It just might not have been my specific thing.
Yeah.
Okay, as far as that goes, though, I would say it does a very good job of, like, keeping it PG-13.
Yes, I appreciate
where, like, the
that.
blood is very short.
Yeah.
At any time. Like, there's, like, the scene where Harlan cuts his throat. There's, like, the very brief shot where Fran finds the body.
Yeah.
And there's the scene where Marta finds Fran at the end and she's dying. And she has to, like, help keep her alive. That was kind of weird. But beyond, like, they keep it very short and, like, not super gory. Like, it's just kind of like, oh, that happened. But then move on.
Yeah, I'm just a little overly sensitive to those things, so it just bothered me a bit more than the average person.
Yeah. But I would say, as the genre goes, I feel like that was
very PG.
Pretty PG-13.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. In terms of rating, yeah, I think it pretty much kept with it. I, like, personally, I know there were, like, a couple of instances of, like, using the Lord's name in vain, like, you know, like, JC type of, like, expletives.
There's some swearing.
Yeah, I didn't really think that was necessary. So that was one thing that, like, kind of bugged me. But otherwise it wasn't very gory. There wasn't really any, like, sexually explicit content or anything like that.
Yeah.
Which was good. Yeah. I did kind of, like, feel like, I don't know, I didn't know what to make of this, because, like, there was definitely, like, a religious, like, presence with certain things. Like, I know I said earlier about, like, they showed, like, the rosary in Marta's car, and then I know there was, like, an image of Mary in one scene, and I can't remember if it was in the family's house or if it was in Marta's house. But I didn't know how I felt about that, because I was like, if it was in the family's house, like, it felt a little, like, maybe hypocritical of, like, we're this religious and like, you know, like, striving to be holy family, and yet there's all of this cunning and all of this deceit, And I don't know, that didn't really like sit well with me for some reason, but that was just a personal observation. But in terms of my opinion about the movie as a whole, I thought it was very well done, and I would probably, like Laura said, like recommend it to people who like mysteries. I enjoyed it, but I think I like mysteries that have the somewhat more traditional structure to them, where you're figuring it out, or you're trying to, along with the detective, versus like in this movie, having more of that dramatic irony where the viewer knows the full story of what happened somewhat early on, and the detective and the other characters are figuring it out. So, yeah, but I thought it was very well done. So,
Well, I think this is going on YouTube, so comment below mysteries we should review, because we're kind of stumped. We have like 3 more that we're like, we're gonna review these, but we're looking for like a couple others. So if you have good mysteries that you think we'll like, comment that down below, and like and subscribe.
yes, and if you are listening and you liked this podcast, we're hoping to do more than just mysteries. We're hoping to expand it to other genres of movies, starting with mysteries, but then expanding. But it will be, like every time, it will be Elizabeth bringing more of that communication arts perspective and interpretation, and myself bringing more of the English literary analysis to the film. So you'll get, and Laura will do a bit of, I don't know.
I'm the comic relief. I'm just here for fun.
Yeah. So
tune in next time. Next time we will be reviewing Murder on the Orient Express,
Yes.
the new version. I don't remember what year it came out,
Yeah.
but if
think
that
it's
interests you, be sure to
2019
tune.
maybe. I don't know.
That sounds right,
I think
ish,
it's
somewhere
2019.
around there.
Yeah.
But we'd love to see you next time.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.